So the agenda for today, we are going to look at the differences between a life cycle assessment and an environmental product declaration. I'll talk about how to interpret the data included in an EPD and also how you can use that data to make sustainable decisions. So first up, a life cycle assessment. What is it? So a life cycle assessment evaluates the environmental impact of a product. Practitioners producing a life cycle assessment do work to an ISO set of standards. However, within those standards, the core indicators can be selected according to the information that a business wants to know. The methodology decisions need to be made or selected, and also practitioners can model various scenarios or undertake a sensitivity analysis. The flexibility within these standards can lead to a lack of uniformity between life cycle assessments. So why would you do an LCA? They are an excellent way for a business to highlight environmental hotspots that they can improve on, perhaps. So, for example, there might be just one or two raw materials that are elevating an otherwise low environmental impact within that life cycle stage. So a business would look to swap out those two raw materials. A business might do an LCA to use as a working document to make environmental improvements, or the intention might be to get an EPD, but they will do a life cycle assessment first and use that to make improvements before initiating the EPD process. So by comparison, an EPD includes an analysis of the life cycle of a product, but it is compiled according to a more comprehensive and strict set of standards. The methodology is stipulated, and there are a core set of indicators that must be included. The results are categorized into modules of life cycle stages, and this provides the ability to really easily compare the environmental impact of products that are fit for the same purpose on an apples for apples basis. Now, this is really important to note. An EPD is not an environmental eco label as such. If a product has an EPD, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is more environmentally friendly than a product without an EPD. An EPD will simply provide transparency of the environmental impact, but that impact could be great, could be good, could be bad, or it could be indifferent. But the data that is provided is a consistent format so that you can easily compare. Now, that was a big lot of information. So if you've got any questions, please ask Paul by typing it in the chat and he will get back to you. So we're mentioning life cycle of a product a lot here. So this is just a real quick recap of what does that mean. So the life cycle will consider the raw materials that have been used, the manufacturing process, the transport or the installation of a finished product, the impact caused by the use of the product during its lifetime, and then the disposal of a product when it reaches its end of life. And then in the blue, These are the modules of an EPD in relation to the stages of a life cycle. So for example, A1 to 3 is cradle to gate, being raw materials in the manufacturing process. Outside of the core indicators that must be included in an EPD, you don't have to include all modules. The modules that have been included on an EPD will be clearly stated. Right, so now we're going to walk through the information that's included on an EPD. First page, you'll have the certification number and the validity date. It will have general information about the company and the products that are included on the EPD. It will state the declared unit. So in the case of saveBOARD products, it is per metre squared. Per metre square is the declared unit. Timber, for example, the declared unit is a cubic metre. Here it states all of the modules that are included in this EPD, and then it has a time period. Now this is the time period that the data was collected. It is not a validity date. This is in the same table, the life cycle information. There will also be an overview of the life cycle for the product that is included in this EPD. So for example, it will tell you exactly what raw materials have been used. It will tell you how the product is manufactured. It will tell you how the product gets distributed, how the product is installed, what is required to install it, and also what waste is generated during install. And lastly, what happens to that product at the end of life. So that's an interesting table as well. And then as you progress through an EPD, the information gets gradually more detailed. So in this section, this is more details about the modules that are declared in the EPD. So this table defines what each model pertains to. So for example, A1 is raw materials. C4, just disposal. Okay, and then you'll see here the little X's. The X's are basically a tick to define what modules have been declared, and ND stands for not declared. Right, so the content information table. This shows detailed information of the raw materials that have been used to manufacture a product, and also the packaging materials. This content information table is really handy if you just want to have a real quick look to easily see if virgin raw materials are used in the manufacture of that product, or if waste materials are being used, which is shown here. The numbers in the first column is the amount of each raw material. So for example, waste Tetra Pak, there are 2 kilos of waste Tetra Pak for each square metre of product. The post-consumer recycled column is the amount of recycled content. So a very handy tip, you can work out how much recycled content is in the product by calculating the total weight of the product. So this column, in this instance 7.2, and then calculating the post-consumer or waste product, in this instance 7.03. And then if you divide that, times it by 100, that will give you 97.6. That is the total percentage of recycled product. Now, you don't need to remember that. Paul is going to put that into the chat now if you want a copy. I don't remember anything mathematical, hence the copy. So this content table, if you're comparing 2 products, it might look quite different to the secondary product if there's no recycled or biogenic carbon content. So I'll just show you a real quick version of that. Oh, I might do. Oh, no, here it is. So this content information on this EPD only has 2 columns. So at a glance, if you were comparing the 2 products, you would know that this particular one has no recycled content or biogenic carbon included in the product. Okay. So next on the EPD, following this table, there would be information about clarifications, the compliance standards, the rules and the assumptions that have been applied. And now we're coming in to the grand finale, the source of all truths, the environmental information section. Now, I know you can't read this. I've blown it up on the next slide. But if you want to know the outcome of an EPD straight away, you need to go to this bit. This is like reading the last page of a thriller. So the points to note here before we go into the blown up bit is that saveBOARD has a separate document or a separate EPD for each product. Some suppliers display their EPD in one document and all of the products are on the one document. So just make sure you're looking at the right product, and also to realize that the information can vary heaps between 2 products, even though it's from the same supplier. So don't make any assumptions there. Now, what you'll find here is the results of all of the data, and it's listed under the life cycle stages and categorized into environmental impacts. So for example, A1 to 3, the environmental impacts in that stage, and then the impact of resource use, waste production, output flows, and then additional environmental impact indicators. So the blown up version. So the bit that I've zoomed in on is the environmental impacts, because this is a key indicator. At the top, you will have the EPD modules collated into life cycle stages. And then you'll see quite a lot at the beginning there about GWP. So this stands for global warming potential. And this particular result is one that is often quoted. And in particular, A1 to 3 being the cradle to gate stage. The number here is the impact of the raw materials and the manufacturing process of the product. To see the outcome, the global warming impact total figure is what you need to look at. So for example, in this instance, this is saveBOARD exposed lining. The global warming impact of that product cradle to gate is minus 7.4 kilos of carbon per metre square. Now, another trick for young players here, and this took me a bit of a while to get my head around, Paul will attest to that. The formatting of the EPD is listed using exponential notations. So I've just blown up here the global warming potential of our multi-use product, because this one is the one that tripped me up. This one is noted as minus 1.01, E plus 0.1. So with that exponential notation, it means you have to bump that decimal point, meaning the actual number is minus 10.10 kilos of carbon per metre square. Now, in some instances, that might be a minus 6, which is a whole lot of zeros that wouldn't fit in those boxes, and it would be a very difficult table to read. Hence, exponential notations. So make a note of that and be aware of that if you are transcribing these numbers into a different document to make your calculations. Now, on calculations, if you're calculating embodied carbon, the numbers from product EPDs are already loaded into various databases like the New Zealand Green Building Council one-click LCA or VQuest. So you basically enter all of the products that you have used and the numbers will automatically pull down to calculate the embodied carbon of the build or your retrofit. Lots of information. I've got a super easy slide next. Comparing EPDs. So what I've done here, I've gone and I've got information from 4 different EPDs of common rigid air barriers that are in the market. So you can use the information from the global warming potential, in this case, A1 to 3. I've taken that total number and compared the four EPDs. You can see that they range from minus 5.51, being saveBOARD better brace, up to a positive 6.43. So that's a huge saving, up around 11 kilos per square meter of carbon. Over 10 kilos of carbon per square meter of product. Get that right. Now, another quick one here. I've compared internal linings. So ranging from exposed internal lining, minus 7.4, plasterboard 2.64. Now, if you were using plasterboard, you'd be like 2.64, that's not bad. But if you go through the process of this comparison, you can see that actually you could be saving 10 kilos of carbon per square meter if you were to use exposed internal lining or a 10 millimeter untreated plywood. So that is us for today. Gone a little bit over my 15 minutes, I think, but if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat now. We're available to stay on and answer those for you. Otherwise, if you're dashing off, thank you very much for coming along, for your time, and thank you for your interest. And I do hope that you have learned something today.